Good morning to you, and we are glad that you could find a time to join us this morning. And here is the latest headlines from across the continent of Africa. The Star newspaper from Kenya: mystery of 1 billion Kenya shillings lost in ghost schools cash. Report shows auditors could not trace schools where millions were wired for capitation. And the main pictorial on the Star newspaper: 369 KCP boy opts to repeat for lack of Form 1 fees, and clerics push for Ruto Raila talks as mass action ultimatum lapses. Such as some evangelical church bishops are in a fresh push to have President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga meet and have talks to cool political temperatures in the country. The two leaders have recently taken extreme positions with growing fears of a looming confrontation. The story is on page 7 on the Star newspaper. Auditor General's office in cash crisis after MPs slash budget by 137 million Kenya shillings. That is what you have on the front page of the Star newspaper. The Standard newspaper: inside Ruto's 200 billion Kenya shillings budget. President assented to bill that allows government to spend 200 billion Kenya shillings before the end of the financial year, with the hustlers and suppliers among the major beneficiaries. And then just up there, experts sound alarm as rivers and lakes dry up. Ex-soldier wins 30 million Kenya shillings against KDF. Private funds at sea over NSSF rates, and businesses worry as mass action deadline nears. Okay. The Daily Nation: Buckle up, storm gathers over economy amid grand prizes. Treasury CS Njuguna Ndungu is quoted as saying, "From all the things we have analyzed, 2023 is not looking good. There are clear signals that it is going to be a tough year." Okay. Why there is a fuel shortage? The story is on page 7. Outrage over Senator's anti-media tweet. A journalist condemned Cheruyot's brazen attack on press freedom. That we have on page 5. Let's now look at some other newspapers from Nigeria. The Punch: banks in partial compliance begin skeletal recirculation. This day also from Nigeria: INEC's application to court to recognize beavers, as Nigerians refer to them, beavers raising integrity question. And then we look at the daily news from Zimbabwe. ZEC tiff appears to be worsening as displaced Chikumba lays down to law. Okay, the Daily Monitor from Uganda: government team stuck in pornography fight. Okay. The Herald from Zimbabwe: local varsity pioneers road tolling system. The New Times from Rwanda: how 70 billion Rwandan francs project will boost smallholder farmers' agri-exports. And the Daily Trust from Nigeria, I believe: queues for cash persist, customers bribe bank officials. And then Pretoria from the South Africa: SA, here is your new cabinet. President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday did a reshuffle of his cabinet, and so the main pictorial on the front page of the Pretoria News is just having the faces of the new cabinet. The Sowetan as well from South Africa: Cyril plays musical chairs. I guess he just moved them around from that headline, and he didn't do much changes there. But I know the Ministry of Energy has a new, I think it has a new minister now. And then Newsday: ED ally defies mining ban. And the Nation: Naira scarcity lingers despite Supreme Court judgment. The Citizen from Tanzania: stakeholders welcome education circular. That there is a problem there. And the Daily Mail from the UK: we will push human rights law to limit. And the Daily Telegraph is all from the UK: block funds for MPs who don't toe line on lockdown. Daily Express: Suella, back law to stop boats or betray Britain. The Metro: families double tragedy. So that is just what we have, and some of these newspapers and headlines from across Africa and others from across the world. Let me see if I can get us the weather update in some key cities today across Africa. We start with Johannesburg, highs of 24 degrees Celsius and lows of 16 degrees, and it's going to be partly cloudy. In Nairobi, it is a beautiful sunny day, highs of 29 degrees Celsius expected and lows of 16 degrees Celsius. And in Accra, that is in Ghana, highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 26, and it's going to be mostly cloudy there. And in Dakar, 25 degrees Celsius in the high, and the low is at 21 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be mostly sunny. And in Abuja, that is in Nigeria, highs of 38 degrees Celsius and lows of 24 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be partly cloudy. Let me see if I can find us one or two sports news in this Kenyan newspaper. Let me see what they have covered on the back page of the Standard newspaper. What a bitter pill to swallow. Man United's level performance has dropped since the team lifted the League Cup. Liverpool record their biggest competitive win against Manchester United, and for Liverpool it was the wildest of dreams. For Manchester United, the worst nightmare in what has been such a promising first season in charge for manager Erik ten Hag. Liverpool 7-0 rout of United in the Premier League on Sunday has the potential to have a lasting impact on both teams' ambitions this term. It was Manchester was beaten 0. They lost to Liverpool. All 7 points. Is that football or basketball? Okay. Belgium defender retires from international duty. Defender Toby Alderweireld was part of Belgium's so-called golden generation of players who finished third at the 2018 World Cup. Is quitting international soccer, the Belgium Federation said yesterday. So let me see if I can find us something else from the continent. Catch me if you can. I think that is the Kenya Cup finals, defending champions Kabras on Kenya Rugby here, and then Eldoret City Marathon winners to be awarded on Friday in Friday Gala, and Champions League knockout games put coach jobs at risk. That is what we have as covered, and then I think here the rest are just local stories. And let me see the Star newspaper. Magical Kenya Open to run from Thursday to Sunday. That is the golf tournament that I think it's annual. And then champs in town, Ashun Gagley and Harding return as pro ampties of this week. Still the golf tournament that is expected to take place from Thursday to Sunday. Simiyu eyes Budapest Glory. Commonwealth 10,000 meter silver medalist targets top prize at Global Show. And more sprinters to represent the country, Kenya in East African champs in Tanzania. We don't produce a lot of these sprinters. We have the long distance runners here, but every now and then we get a few in that category. And I think that is what we have. And then I see the Premier League standings there, and then Spanish La Liga, German Bundesliga, Italian Serie A, and French Ligue 1. Is that how you say it? Okay. I think now you must be up to date. So let's just get into some other news that I'd like for us to look at this morning, some of which I think I updated you with on our afternoon show yesterday, but we did not get a chance to get into the details of it, like the following story on South Sudan. And South Sudan's main opposition political party, the Sudan's People's Liberation Movement in Opposition, SPLM-IO, is demanding that President Salva Kiir reinstates Defense Minister Angelina Tenyi. President Kiir sacked Ms. Tenyi on Friday. In a presidential decree, she was the country's first female defense minister. The president also dismissed Interior Minister Mahmoud Solomon. No reasons were given for their sacking. Mr. Kiir also swapped the Ministry of Defense to his political party. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement, SPLM, and the Interior Ministry to the SPLM-IO. The SPLM-IO has condemned and rejected the unilateral removal of Ms. Taney. It called it a violation of the revitalized peace agreement, which gives parties the power to remove their representatives in the Council of Ministers and to nominate their replacement by notifying the president. It said swapping of the ministries also violates the provisions of the peace agreement, which requires the parties to agree on the allocation and selection of ministerial portfolios in the unity government. In a statement, Riek Machar, the SPLM-IO leader and the first vice president, called for the president to revoke the unilateral decree, adding that his party was committed to the revitalized agreement. Analysts now say this new latest move seems to suggest that relations between Mr. Kiir and Mr. Machar still remain strained. Okay. So for those who don't know, this former Minister now of Defense, Angelina Teny, is the wife of South Sudan's first Vice President Riek Machar. So she has been removed from that docket. She has been removed from the Ministry of Defense, and I don't think she's been placed anywhere else. So basically, she has been removed from the cabinet. Now that is very key, and when you look at perhaps the powers that President Salva Kiir has when it comes to even picking the members of his cabinet, it is quite limited in the sense that he can't do that without, one, consulting with other stakeholders and other parties in this regard, the SPLM-IO, which is led by Riek Machar and other parties that are represented in this transitional government. And one of the key requirements in line with, it's a very unique way of working, which I don't know if it's the best, but it is what I guess the drafters of this revitalized peace agreement could come up with to see if Sudan could find a working document as they prepare to transit. And maybe as they were putting down this document, they might not have envisaged a situation where this working document will be there as long as it is. They were hoping that perhaps South Sudan will keep up with the timeline and have a transition as quickly as possible. But South Sudan has remained at that space of transition and not fully transiting, but just there. They've not been making any much progress as far as getting them there as fast as possible or as soon as possible. And so this has posed other problems. And this working document that was meant to be very temporary and for just a limited period of time has become now something that they have to they have to work with, basically. And on top of that, maybe it might not be alive to some of the issues and whatever agreement or issues that are being raised by other stakeholders in South Sudan. So it has been in direct contradiction sometimes, and we've seen some leaders contradicting this working document, the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018, and we've seen others blatantly not really respecting some of the issues that were spelled out and some of the directives that were given. It's like a constitution, a mini constitution, and it was to help this transitional government work its way through, because it's a very unique way of governing, I must say. I mean, you have one president, you have 5 vice presidents. All these 5 vice presidents, every now and then, also imagine they are the president, also imagine they have the similar powers. And I think sometimes President Salva Kiir, wants to prove that I am the president. There's only one of me, and then there are 5 of you, but still in the hierarchical power system, I'm still the head of state. And because of that, there's always find themselves in a loggerhead, especially with his first vice president, Dr. Riek Machar, which they've always have had this relationship that has not been very, I guess, not very good for the people of South Sudan, because they're very strong-minded people and they have very strong-minded supporters around them who take very hard stance as far as matters of national interest is concerned, and most of the times they're just looking out for their own interest and what is good for them, and they're just looking out what they stand to gain in this government and where they stand in South Sudan. And a lot of times the issues that they bring up really has nothing to do with the betterment of the people of South Sudan. And that is the tragedy that we see every now and then play out in the country of South Sudan. So now President Salva Kiir decided to sack basically Angelina Teny, who was the Minister for Defense, and Angelina Teny is the wife of, I don't want to call him the arch rival of President Salva Kiir, but he is Dr. Riek Machar. He is, and the reason why he's been given the position of the first vice president, he seems to be superior compared to the rest of other vice presidents. There are 5, remember, but Dr. Riek Machar is the first vice president, so his position seems to come with a bit of an impotence compared to the others. So. But he's not equal. They act as if they're equal, but he's not equal to the president, because the president is the president. But lots of times, if now and then, they challenge that. They challenge that perception. As I've said, South Sudan's governance system is quite unique in the sense that President Salva Kiir does not enjoy certain powers that we see other presidents enjoy in the rest of these other stable, independent countries. And so there are things he can't just make a unilateral decision. He has to consult, like in the case of sacking or choosing a minister in any portfolio in South Sudan. So how this revitalized, I don't know, the makers of this revitalized peace agreement, I don't know if this was the best way to, especially when it comes to the hiring and firing of these government officials, if that was the right way to draft it. But it requires, of course, it was spelled out in these positions, how they should divide among themselves. SPLM, that is the party of the President Riek Machar, has to get a certain number of ministers, and SPLM-IO, that is led by Dr. Riek Machar, has to get a certain number of ministerial positions and other government positions, and these are the smaller parties that form part of this transitional government. And the agreement further goes to say that the names that have been proposed by any other party, the president does not have a right to really refuse to agree. So we've seen this become a contention, because there are some names that perhaps SPLM-IO will prefer and will forward for certain positions to be considered. And President Salva Kiir will blatantly say, no, I don't think I want to have this person, or I will not agree to this, I will not appoint this person. And they always challenge that, and they say, you don't have any say in it. What the peace agreement states is that any decision we make as SPLM-IO, and we forward you this name, and we say this is the person we feel will fit in that position that we are supposed to fill, then this is the person you should agree and you should go by. You don't have any say on this. And so that leaves President Salva Kiir in a very precarious situation. And I think for some reason, some of the people that SPLM-IO, especially SPLM-IO and other the smaller parties sometimes propose to take up these positions. Usually it's in direct contradiction, and President Salva Kiir is not always in agreement with that. So for some reason they just look for individuals that perhaps don't have a very rosy history as far as working together, because they've worked together, they were fighting together when they wanted to secede and all that, so they know each other in that regard. So maybe they have history that might not be gelling now, and forcing them to work together is something that truly tries their patience, and we've seen how that has worked out. Not very good for the people of South Sudan. So now President Salva Kiir decides to fire the Minister of Defense, Angelina Teny, and that is, I think, direct confrontation by his first vice president, who is the husband of Angelina Teny, and that is Dr. Riek Machar. And how did we get a husband and a wife? Well, it's not a phenomenon, right? We have President Yoweri Museveni, the president, and then we have the Minister for Education, that is the First Lady of Uganda. So it's not a phenomenon. We have the Equatorial Guinea situation where the president, Obiang, and we have his vice president, who is his son. Okay, and we also have what we have so many examples across the continent of Africa, and that ridiculous cabinet, the president, what do you call him, the current president of Malawi, brought when he was elected. Remember, after court nullified the win of Peter Mutharika, and the current president was elected. And you saw that ridiculous cabinet that he put up. He just brought in relatives from people who are related. And I think I normally joke, every time they had these cabinet meetings, I think it was just a big family reunion of some sort. You find a brother holding one docket, a sister on the other docket, a cousin, an assistant minister, another one, so it was, and a very close friends of his. And that wasn't serving the country very well. So he had to fire everybody and reconstitute a cabinet that actually could function and could serve the people of Malawi. Okay? He realized that does not work. Okay, so he had to fire them and reconstitute his cabinet. So having these relatives working in the same, people from the same, nepotism, that's what it is, working in the same government. I don't know, we do it without shame. We've normalized it. That is not even a problem anymore. But the problem with that, if these people were working, then maybe it's okay. But also, in a country where you have diversity, in a country where you have many other communities that wants to be represented, in a country where you have many other people who are also just as qualified as the next person, but you decide the president, the first vice president, will be Dr. Riek Machar. Okay, that was a working agreement, so I don't think that there was anything that would have been done around that time. Remember, the war broke up in 2013 because of the disagreements between Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir and other fractions. And so they had to find a working relationship and just get a balance to see that there's some level of stability and South Sudan can move forward so that they can form this transitional government that will allow for a proper election so that the country can move forward. I've said here numerous times, and I will keep repeating, the current leadership of South Sudan is holding the country at a ransom. I don't think they're interested in transition. I don't think they're interested in moving forward, because the way things are in South Sudan works pretty much very well for them, and it serves them perfectly. You ask me, how do I know about this? Well, we've seen several reports that have come out of South Sudan that every now and then has been presented at the United Nations Security Council. We've seen the report by Sentry and other organizations that show how much corruption is ongoing, how much members of the political class and those who are closer to them, how much they're benefiting and how much wealth they have amassed. South Sudan cannot account for the money that it makes from its oil. South Sudan does not have structures and institutions that allows for accountability and proper management of public money. So it's very difficult for you to know even what is happening. Matter of fact, South Sudan's Revenue Authority, that will be the taxman in South Sudan, in Kenya's KRA, Kenya Revenue Authority. There it's let's just call them the taxman in South Sudan. It was discovered that it does not have, people don't just pay tax to one account. There's numerous other accounts that go to individual pockets. So that is what we are dealing with. And that's why, no surprise, South Sudan is the second most corrupt country in the world. The first one is Somalia, and that is because of the situation and the instability that a country like South Sudan experiences. And this instability, it appears, on one side, I try to really be objective in this matter. But when you look at the interest and the people and how they operate and the manner in which they decide to look at some of these issues, you realize that nobody is interested in transition. Nobody's interested in transition. They kept pushing the date for elections farther and farther, and now I think they pushed it to next year in December. I highly doubt if that will happen, because if you see now the firing of Angelina Teny, the wife of the first vice president, I think this President Salva Kiir is just exacerbating the conflict, and he's making it worse. I don't know if he fired her because she was not working. If he fired her because she was not working, then that is a different case. But even in the manner in which he decided to fire her is what is questionable, because according to, I told you, it's a very unique way of governance and workings in South Sudan. SPLMIO is supposed to decide. The Minister of Defense, who is from our party, is not working. So therefore, we want to recall Angelina Teny, and this is the name that we're proposing. This is the person that we're proposing to take up her position. That is how it is supposed to work. So it is not for President Salva Kiir to decide how and who and when to reshuffle that cabinet. He's not allowed to touch on these other ministers from this other side. That is what the peace agreement actually states. And that's why I was just questioning these people who are putting up this peace agreement, if at all they had foreseen these kinds of challenges, because as much as we want everyone to have a say, and this is a very unique situation, I've said here so many times, but I think the president should have been allowed to have a bit of some leeway when it comes to maybe picking up or some of these government positions. But then again, because of how South Sudan and the leadership is structured and the issue of ethnicity, it's a big thing in South Sudan, and nepotism, as we now see. I think it was also important balancing power like that to ensure he does not have so many powers, because the way South Sudan is with its fragility, maybe the crafters of this peace agreement realized that it will be very dangerous to put too much power in one person, and owing to the bickering and the back and forth, maybe there will be abuse of power, maybe, I don't know, but still that hasn't fully solved the problem of South Sudan. So there are a lot of factors that maybe, had these crafters of this revitalized peace agreement decide that maybe this will be a good way of governing. So the SPLMIO has condemned and have rejected what President Salva Kiir did, and that is the unilateral, what they say is a unilateral removal of Ms. Teny for this position. So when you hear SPLMIO has condemned and rejected, what you should know is that that is Dr. Riek Machar speaking. You just fired my wife. He can't say it like that. He can't say it like that. But that is his wife who has been fired. So I don't know if this will make things any better. I doubt this will improve anything. Well, have they been working on anything lately? I don't know, because there are things that they're supposed to be implementing. They're supposed to be, well, last week they met with is it the election commission or something? Because they want to start preparing for their elections for next year, which I'm cautiously optimistic. Yes, I'm cautiously optimistic. We might come towards the end of the year, and then they might decide again, oh, well, 2024 is almost here, and look at us, you're not ready to have this election. So for that reason, we will postpone it again, because they've done that numerous times before. So until the elections come and they happen, and the people of South Sudan do go to these elections, then I really can't count these eggs yet until they're hatched. I think that's where I stand. I'll just be watching and seeing if at all they will live up to that. And I think they're setting up stage for this election not to take place. Because by firing this lady, and I want to believe, if she was fired because she was not performing, then by all means, let her get fired. But if President Salva Kiir decided to remove her from this position because of whatever squabbles that he has with the husband, then that is a problem. And that will just compound these complications in South Sudan further. Was that the right move? I don't know. And what makes it worse is President Salva Kiir did not even give reasons as to why he fired. And well, most presidents, you will argue, that's how they do. President Ramaphosa yesterday, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, reshuffled his cabinet, and he moved what South Africans are calling now the chess game or whatever. He just moved them in different positions, and others were completely removed from the cabinet, and he brought in new faces, and hopefully he's trying to figure out who fits where, and if at all this new cabinet will perform and help in implementing the government agenda. So it's a normal thing for a government to reshuffle. It's a normal thing for a president to fire a cabinet secretary or a minister they feel is not serving well or is not working together, is not sharing the same vision of the sitting government. These ministries, their biggest mandate is to implement the agenda of the government of the day. So when you hear the president saying, this is what we intend to do, and this how many roads we intend to build, the schools, this is how much we intend, the reforms we want to make in this and that, he will say it, or she will say it, or they will say it, the leaders will say it, but the people who are responsible for implementing the government policies are these ministries, so they're very important. So you want to have people there who share the same ideology, who share the same vision, and who truly understand what your agenda is, so that they are able to help you implement it. That's why you have ministers. But is that how we see them walk around here or anywhere? Many a times, no. So if she was not performing, if Miss Angelina Teny was not performing, then she was fired for non-performance, then okay, that's fine. And President Salva Kiir will be in his right to fire her. Unfortunately, that is not how it should be working in South Sudan. He does not have that mandate. Be it as it may that he is the head of state, he still must consult with the husband of Angelina Teny, who is the first vice president of South Sudan. So, he should have consulted and said, I'm thinking about firing your wife. So could you give us a name to replace her? Okay? Or better still, this is how really it's supposed to work. Riek Machar is supposed to sit down and decide, this Minister of Defense, she's not truly representing SPLM-IO. I don't know how much she's doing to serve SPLM-IO, because these parties really don't serve the people, they serve these individuals. And who can we replace her with? So they forward the name to replace the wife. So neither of that situations took place. So President Salva Kiir, in firing Angelina Teny, actually violated some of the aspects of the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018. So it's very complicated. So my worry is such things are usually triggered to more conflict. Before you know it, you'll see more targeted conflict, communal fightings and all that, and you'll see an atmosphere, a build-up of more anger, a build-up of more instability, and I think that for me is the biggest worry. So as much as it was the right thing to do, according to the position of President Salva Kiir, I don't know if it was the wise thing to do. You could be right, and you could be having all the facts together before you make a decision and you feel you're right, and truly you're right when you look at the facts. But are we looking at right, or are we looking at wise? Was it the wise thing to do? When you look at all these other things that you have to consider and the fragility that is the country of South Sudan, was it the wise thing to do for President Salva Kiir to fire the wife of the first vice president, Dr. Riek Machar? And Dr. Riek Machar, you could not find any of your friends you could trust to have that position. It had to be your wife. That is nepotism. That is ridiculous. That is unacceptable. And we should not be normalizing these kinds of things in our governance systems. These are things we should not be allowing. A few cases I've named there, but this is not something that we should allow and we should normalize and decide now this is normal. It is not. You cannot be the first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan and then your wife holds a very key position. Minister of Defense, that's a key position in a government. And I wonder why her? Was there no anybody else that was competent from SPLM-IO that also could take up this position? So you are getting a hefty salary and all these packs that you're getting, your wife as well. When you sit down at night, you feel good about it. You're not ashamed. You're not ashamed. You're not ashamed. This should not be acceptable. And I want to understand your position and maybe the position of SPLM as to why you thought your wife was best suited for that. Maybe you wanted someone in that position, someone you could really, really trust, and someone who, I don't know, you could trust. Basically, I think it boils down to trust in this case. And you decided your wife was the best person to take up that position. And it's not the first time. There has been a controversy again, before I can't remember which one, in regards to something that Angelina Teny did. I think there's some orders she was giving at that time, the minister, and they were not being followed and they're not being implemented. And I think there's an argument around that time that President Salva Kiir has not yet appointed new ministers or has not done the, these terms are renewed, so the parliament had expired or something like that. It was another controversy surrounding that position. And so I'm just hoping that this firing of Angelina Teny of Defense Minister of South Sudan, will not cause more problems to a country that is already going through so much. And the instability is surmountable. So I'm just hoping that this will not compound the issues that are already in existence there in South Sudan and the animosity that runs between the president and the deputy, his first vice president, and other fractions. I doubt this will help anything, but I'm just hoping that things will not completely get out of control. But I guess we'll just wait and see. But when you hear SPLM-IO saying they condemn and reject the unilateral removal, that is first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar saying he rejects and condemns the removal of his wife from that position. Because these parties, they don't have agendas. They're just people-driven. And they serve their own interest, and that is, if at all they had the people's agenda, then we will see them do and act differently. There's a story I wanted us to talk about, but I don't have time, so I will skip over, and then I'll be back here at 3 p.m. and we will talk about it. And that is some brewing problem in Central African Republic. The former president, I think, is in exile. He went to exile in Guinea-Bissau. His name is François Bozizé. And he had gone in exile. He came back. I don't want to get into the details of that and some things that the current president said. I told you about that meeting they're having of developing countries in Qatar. Was it in Qatar? Is it in Dubai or Qatar? In Qatar, and he mentioned a couple of things. There seems to be some problems they are brewing, but I don't want us to talk about that right now because that requires a bit of time. It's a long history that I need to bring us and then tie it with the current affairs and what is ongoing in Central African Republic. So I will not get into that, okay? But I promise at 3 p.m. East African time, that will be our conversation. Now, the Tanzanian government has banned boarding at nursery and lower years at primary schools, saying their aim is to give children the opportunity to bond with their families, understanding the traditions, cultures, and the values of the country. Education Commissioner Leah Bwene Mtahabwa says boarding services for children up to the age of 10 will end next month, and they will remain as day scholars until they reach the next grade known in Tanzania as Standard 5. She did, however, say exceptions can be made for pupils whose parents or guardians obtain a special permit, exempting them from the change in rules. Ms. Mtahabwa says any school found to be violating the directives will face disciplinary measures, including striking pupils from their books. Boarding schools are very popular in Tanzania and are offered both privately and by the state. Most of the boarding schools affected by these measures will be private, as not many state-run primary schools accept boarders. Well, there's a time I was talking to a child psychologist, because I've always struggled to understand why a parent will deem it fit to take an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old to a boarding school. I've never understood that, because from my understanding, these are the formative years where a child is still finding themselves. They're still building their personalities and their characters. And they need the nurturing, especially of their parents, during that very sensitive years and formative years of their lives. And so I've always struggled when I see very young children being taken to boarding schools. And so when I was having this, it was an interview I had many, many years ago with a child psychologist, and she made me understand sometimes why some parents find it necessary to take their kids to school. And one of them could be maybe the parent is never present. Maybe they work too much and they're never present, and because they have to provide for this child. So instead of just leaving them by themselves with a nanny who maybe they might not be fully trusting, and they have to provide for this child, and because they don't have any other option, so they opt to take this child to a boarding school. Another instance is maybe when perhaps the home is not hospitable enough. Maybe there's a lot of violence and a lot of abuse at home, so it's not a very safe environment for a child to be raised in such an environment. So some parents will opt to take a child to a boarding school. And she gave me, different reasons as to why, because I always struggle, and I still do struggle, because I've seen a few instances where the home was a safe environment for this child. Both mom and dad were there, and it's a loving, wonderful home, but for some reason, they just imagine that it is for the best interest of the child to send this child away to a boarding school at a very young age. In high school, I think it's fine. At that time, these kids are grown, and I think it's good for them. And it teaches them a few things. But I think at high school, they can handle it better. They're a bit more mature to some extent, and they're able to handle them not being at home. And by this age, I think they're normally like 13 going to 14, 15 there, when they're joining high school. They have you have instilled those very important values, and you've helped them in whatever their personalities and all that. So you've nurtured that aspect of them. So when you're sending them out there into the world, you could be halfway confident, because when they go there, sometimes they come back and you don't understand the influence they get from their peers. But when you have drilled certain things in them, you have some level of confidence that however much whatever, they will be okay because of what you have instilled in them. So I've always thought these formative years are very, very important. So now Tanzania is banning boarding school. I didn't know there are nursery schools that had boarding. Like you take your 4-5-year-old, that is the nursery going age. 3 nowadays, I see them here early in the morning. A child is 3 years. They're standing so early, waiting for the bus in the cold at 6 a.m. What is this that this child is going to study at 3 years this early? I don't get it. I think I'm a very traditional parent. My son went to a kindergarten very close to the house, and they arrived at 8:30, and they went to school half day. He was picked half day. That is enough. At the age of 3.5, that's enough learning for the child. But I guess things have changed, and then you find that a parent lives in one side of town, and because they believe the school that is many kilometers away is the best for their child, so a child has to wake up so early, wait for the school bus, pick them up at 6. They're 3 years, they're 3.5, they're 4. You see them shivering in the morning. They go to school to another place, the other side of town. You wonder, then if that school is really important for you like that and you feel is the best, why don't you then move closer to the school so that you make it easier for your child then to go to that school? So these are things that I struggle with, and I see a lot of especially these younger parents, in the name of trying to get the best for our children. You see, it's sometimes it's not for the best. It's not, the child really suffers in the process of us trying to give them the best. And so boarding schools, I agree with this move by the Tanzanian government. We should not be having nursery boarding schools. For what? We should not be having a lower school boarding schools. They're banning that, but they're saying if there's an exception, maybe some of the things that I was explaining to you of what this child psychologist told me could be some of the reasons why some parents opt to take these kids to boarding schools. Then in those few exceptions, then perhaps. But I think that having a child that young, so far away from you, you're just robbing them of that love. And fine, you want them to be independent, but you'll see that they become toxic. The independence is very toxic. I'm not saying you should have a child that needs you throughout. I don't want that. But you want a child that you're also connected with, but they can be independent, but they also recognize, your place in their life. But if you throw them out there like that, and they become disconnected to you, they go on about life without really needing you like that. So fine, they'll get their independence and all these things, but in the long run, I've seen so many cases and I've read so many stories and watched so many shows that tells you a lot of these times these kids might have to seek for therapy later on in life, because a lot of this, your 4-year-old, your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old in these boarding schools, they'll not be handled with love and nurturing the way you would do at home. And they're still very young and they're kids. So they're still learning, they're still making a lot of mistakes at home. That might be a teaching moment when a child makes a mistake and say, hey, that is not how we do this thing. This is how we, you correct it, and it's a learning moment. In school, with the population they have up there, they don't have time for that. So your child is denied that. And so they get damaged emotionally, they get damaged, and you have a child who is just there, do not know who they are. They struggle to find their identity and where they fit in the world, because that was never properly instilled in them. They were somewhere out there while you were busy to make a living, and you should not feel guilty about it, trying to take care of them. So I think there's no winning, but just find a balance in what works for you. But I support this move by the Tanzanian government. Young children should be at home with their guardians, with their parents, and when maybe they're teenagers, that age is not bad. They can go to a boarding school because somehow they can manage. But a certain tender age, I find I don't get it. But I guess to each their own. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you later on here at 3 p.m. East African time. It has been a pleasure. Bye-bye for now.